Because if they just did that, we'd be fine. Because the problem is, career politicians approach a problem from their perspective. Because their problem is getting reelected. And oftentimes, to get reelected, you do what is popular. But sometimes doing what's popular, or usually doing what's popular, is wrong. Right? In the 1990s, it was popular to tell people to buy internet stocks, but it was wrong. And then it was popular to tell people to lie about their income and use a subprime mortgage to buy a house they couldn't afford, but that was wrong.
Yeah, no kidding.
What the government is doing now is wrong, and somebody has to let them know that it was wrong. And I think I'm somebody that has enough credibility that I can pull it off. The people that they're listening to in Washington right now, people like Ben Bernanke and Timothy Geithner, they have never gotten anything right. They have been wrong on everything they've ever said. And it's easily demonstrated because the evidence is there. On the other hand, I have a history of understanding economics and getting it right. So hopefully I can convince these guys in Washington that they're listening to the wrong people and that they need to do something for their country for a change. That this is bigger than just their own ambition. That this is really a critical time in American history. The stakes are very high. And so we need to take a look at what we're doing and act for the nation. We need to seriously shrink the government. The government is much too big, and we are too broke to afford it. We can't talk about, freezing spending on 20% of the budget next year. We can't freeze the budget. It's too big. It's like, somebody puts on 200 pounds, and they go to a dietitian. They say, well, let's freeze your weight. You can't freeze it. You've got to go on a diet. We need to put this country on a serious diet. We need to cut government spending. That means a lot of programs, a lot of departments need to be completely eliminated. We have to actually reduce what government is spending. And if we cut spending enough, well, then we can cut taxes. See, a lot of people want to run for office promising tax cuts. But tax cuts are meaningless without spending cuts. Because if the government just borrows the difference, that's worse. Because now we got to pay it back with interest. And if they borrow the money, where does the money come from? It doesn't come from Santa Claus. They're taking that money out of the economy. And unfortunately, that's the money that businesses need. You don't have capital without savings. And so we run bigger deficits, we have less capital, and we have fewer people employed. The government is there, they're passing bills because they think they're going to create jobs. You don't create jobs by passing bills. You destroy jobs by passing bills. The way you create jobs and the way you grow an economy is to get the government out of the way. So what I want to do when I'm in Washington, I don't want to write any legislation. I just want to lead the charge to repeal all the legislation that's already there. In front of business. And all the problems that we have, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's in housing, they're all government made. And the solutions don't involve spending any money. They simply involve repealing the rules and regulations that have created the problem. And, a lot of people, when I tell them I'm running, I have no experience in elected office. I've never served. I've never run for anything. And they say, you have no experience writing legislation. I said, that's great. I don't want to write anything. I said, what I want to do is repeal legislation, and I have as much experience in repealing legislation as anybody else, because it's never been done. We've been writing rules. The gentleman that spoke before that was running for governor said, you can't cut the income tax. Why? Well, we didn't have it 20 years ago. The state was here. He said, well, it's now part of our spending. That's the problem. Whatever money the government has, they'll figure out how to spend it. You want them to spend less money, take the income tax away, and they'll cut their spending. There you go. So we can't just accept growing government as a permanent state. It doesn't have to be this big, especially since we're now broke. And I know that I'm running out of time, I'm going to take your questions, but a lot of people, have run for office as Republicans, and I voted Republican sometimes, and sometimes I voted Libertarian, and sometimes I didn't vote because I get very frustrated. Because the Republicans never deliver on their promises. They talk about shrinking government, they say the right things, but the minute they get elected, they do all the wrong things. And I think they do that because they want to be in Washington, because they like the power, they like the perks, they want to perpetuate their own careers, and so they sell out their principles. That's not going to happen with me. Right? I'm not going to Washington because I want to be there. I wish I didn't have to go. I wish the country was in much better shape so I can focus on my business. Unfortunately, they've made a mess of it. And so I'm going to go to Washington for a reason. Right? And it's not going to be to get along. It's not going to be to get on the right committee or to try to fundraise for my re-election. I'm going there to bring these principles to Washington and to remind the other Republicans why they're there in the first place, and to get them to actually act on those principles and risk not getting reelected. And I know a lot of times, there are some Republicans that are going to say the right thing. I have no confidence that they're going to do the right thing when they get there. And I know a lot of you probably share that. I know in the past, whenever you've had an election, whoever the Republican is on the ballot, you figure, well, I'm going to vote for him because he's better than the Democrat. So you hold your nose and you vote for the lesser of two evils. But this is going to be your first chance. If I actually get the Republican nomination, you're going to be able to go into that booth and vote for somebody instead of against somebody else. And anyway, I thank you for letting me be here.
You just think right.
No, I'm going to take your question.
Oh no, yes you are, but you're going to start with me. I've been jotting away over here. First off, I need a business card so I can move my money, what's left of it.
I didn't bring any with me.
Okay, so we just
You
need
can find me
I think
online.
there isn't a person in this room who isn't going to fire their financial guy tomorrow. Because I'm sick of looking at the numbers going in the wrong direction and we're not giving them anymore. Anyway, I love that you made that comment about the career politician, and I can pretty much guess that you don't know Chinese either. Okay, that was a big thing that spun it happened. So we saw something. But the one thing that I'm hearing, and I got to tell you, you got my blood going here. Twice you have been Paul Revere. Twice you've been on the horse screaming, "Listen to me!" Now you're going to go to Washington. How in God's name do you think, what are you going to do, run up and down the hallway, meet him in the men's room? What are you going to
Well,
do?
first of all, the reason I am running, one of the reasons is that no one in Washington listens to me as a private citizen. It doesn't matter how many books I write, how many television shows I go on. Washington recently held a hearing to try to figure out why there was a financial crisis. And I tried, I said, look, why don't you I'll give you copies of my book. It won't cost you anything, just read it, And I offered to testify. I'll come down, I'll take the train myself. I called, I said, they won't invite me. You figure, they're trying to figure out why it was a financial crisis. Why not invite one of the few people that actually predicted it? Why just invite the people that said it was impossible, that were blindsided, or worse yet, some of the people that actually were instrumental in creating it? They brought them down. So my hope is that they won't listen to me as a private citizen. But if I'm a senator, they'll have to listen to me because I just go down the hall. I just corner them. And they're going to. I can filibuster.
We got that.
I'm going to try.
So you're going to join them and talk?
And then try to change it from the inside.
I think it's a doable thing. Okay, I'm guessing there's going to be lots of questions. Peter, hang on down there. Peter, go ahead. I'll let you do it.
No, I'm not going to do what I usually do, but
All right.
that was a hell of a speech for no teleprompter.
And one thing, if I ever am elected, I will never have a prepared speech, and so no one will write it. And if anybody has a question, I'll always answer it because I don't get my answers from my pollsters or from my advisors. They're my answers.
No child left behind. I'm going to ask you just three things. No child left behind and immigration. Can you tackle those two first?
Well, from No Child Left Behind, let's just talk about education because obviously that's an education question. I want to get the federal government out of education. They've screwed it up. I'd like to abolish the entire Department of Education. It's a waste of money. And the biggest problem with education right now, at least on the higher education, local schools, local education is not as much to do with the federal government. That's problems with the state government. I'm not running for governor. But the biggest problem in higher education is that it's so expensive. And the only reason it's expensive is because of the government. So if we can get the government out of the business of subsidizing higher education, of loaning money to people to pay inflated tuitions, and of guaranteeing private loans, we won't have a problem with high-cost education because it won't exist anymore. The funny thing is the only reason that students need to borrow money is because governments have made tuition so expensive that they now need the loans.
Let me ask you once again. No child left behind. I don't care about the colleges.
I'm against that federal program.
Okay.
I'm against any there's nothing in the federal Constitution that says the government has anything to do with education. The word education, schools, it doesn't appear in the Constitution. It is not a federal function. Education should be handled locally in communities. The federal government should stay out of it, and they should leave our money here so we can educate our children better. But my point is, in higher education, they've screwed it up. If we simply took the government out of the loan business, colleges would have no choice but to slash tuition, to streamline, and to give Americans low-cost education. Because right now, the only beneficiaries of government aid to education are the universities.